So this is a little bit of a watercolour challenge for me this week, because at the end of class last week, one of my students produced a painting that she'd found in a charity shop and said, how would I paint something like this? So I thought I'd have a little go and see if I could recreate it. Bearing in mind I don't actually have the painting to copy in front of me. I've just got a memory of what she showed me. So I'm just going to lay down a wash this is ultramarine, very weak ultramarine wash. I'm working on one of these block pads where it's been gummed all the way around the edges, so it's pre-stretched. There's a little bit of hair there, which I don't want. And this painting was a long, thin one, so I'm working with something the same sort of proportions, just across like that. Okay, I'm quite happy with that. It's a question of working in layers, this sort of landscape. And again, I've got some more bits and pieces. You can tell I'm using a dusty thing to mix up my paints there. I'm taking those out. Little bits of dust there. Okay, so it's always worth covering your paints when you're not using them so they don't get dust in them. Okay, so I'm going to leave that layer to dry. And then I'm going to work with the layers on top as soon as it is dry. It's going to buckle slightly, but because I'm using one of these blocks, it shouldn't buckle too much. And before I leave it to dry, there's one thing I am going to do, and that is I'm going to take my size 12, it's a clean brush, and I'm just going to, a third of the way down on this side here, I'm going to just lift a little bit of the paint off. There we go. There we go. Right, okay. Come back to that in a little while. Okay, so that is almost dry. It's very, very slightly damp, but I'm just going to touch in a little bit of light, I think it's violet I've got here. It's sort of a light purple, just into this section here, which is going to be useful later. It's not necessarily part of the sky or the background, but later I'm going to pick up on that because I'd like there to be a slightly different shade running through it. Okay, so I'm now going to let that dry again and come back when it's completely flat. Okay, so that's completely dry now, and I'm going to start putting the really background layer. So you've obviously got the sky right at the back, and then we're looking in the far distance. And I'm going to come in between halfway down and a third of the way down. And I'm working with a weak indigo because I want it to be quite vague and a little bit misty. Okay, but I want it to be distinctly different from the ultramarine in the background. I'm just going to be putting a little bit of detail in. Not a huge amount, but a little something just to draw the eye in the background. And as I recall, the painting that I was shown appeared to have a sort of small building in the background with some bits and pieces near it. So we are literally just doing an outline at this stage. And I'm going to just drag it across. So that would be the background horizon. I'm going to pull that colour down. In fact, I think it needs to be a little bit darker than that, actually. You do find that blue is brilliant for painting stuff in the distance. This indigo is very much a sort of a black blue rather than a sort of a purple warm blue, so it's a little colder than a lot of some of the blues you can get. I'm just popping that in and pulling that suggestion of the horizon across. You don't have to be that accurate or that straight, to be honest with you. I'm just putting that in there, and I will let that dry after I've fiddled with it a little bit. We don't want too much definition, but it would be nice to have a little bit. But as I say, it's very much in the background. And we're not wanting to draw the eye to it. We're just making a suggestion that there is something there. Okay, I'm going to allow that to dry and then we can think about the next layer. Okay, so that's our very background. We've got our sun in the sky, we've got whatever this little sort of building is here. Now I'm going to put a layer in front of all of that. I'm going to mix up a little bit of sap green, and I think this one is burnt sienna as well. So I want a kind of indiscriminate sort of bluey, greeny, browny colour, which is not a very good description, I guess. It's vaguely what I remember from the picture that I saw. So bear in mind, I'm not actually copying something that's in front of me. I'm using a 12 round brush, and I'm just going to be putting in a suggestion of a little bit more blue, I think, at this point. Something going on in the background here. And I'm going to be bringing it across here in front of this last layer. Okay. This is, of course, the point where it could all go horribly, horribly wrong, but I'm just having a bit of fun. This is all supposed to be a bit of an experiment. So there we go. A little bit more green, I think, and a little bit more brown. And I'm just putting the sense of something in the background. A bit more blue. Okay. I want it to be a little darker in colour because I would like it not to show this line in the background. So a bit more green, a bit more brown, just improving the concentration of the paint there. Again, I'm working from something in my head which may or may not end up looking like that painting that I was shown. But the principle is the same of how you would put this sort of thing together. I'm going to go right up here, not putting a great deal of detail in. Just working to the edge of the page. I may, when I've finished, end up cropping it down a little bit, but this is what I'm working with at the moment. Keeping it fairly loose, fairly wet. Okay, now maybe a bit more colour in the front here. Now I'm not going to go over all of this purple, because I quite like that purple. I'm going to be wanting that for later. Bit more green dropping into this bit now. So that colour's going to sink back, and I'm just going to drop a bit of colour in here to show that there might actually be quite a lot going on. Don't forget, once it's dry, we can always add more. Okay, now I'm going to be moving more into this sort of ochre, yellow ochre brown that I've got here. Mix that in, bring that in at the bottom there so that it bleeds in a little. Sort of a sandy brown rather than a deep brown. Bring that down. There we go. I'm going to bring it across here at the back, a little bit into this where the paint is still wet here. I haven't gone right to the edge there, but that's not a problem. I shall simply crop the page in. So there's a mix of different colours going on here. And some of it's quite concentrated. But we're just seeing where we're going to go with that. It'd be interesting to see what that looks like when it's dry as well. I'm using quite a side-to-side motion here as well. Again, using my 12 brush, keeping it moving. leaving little gaps. It's always interesting to add little gaps in. Okay, so we've got some of that colour showing. That's good, I like that. Okay, so I think I'm going to allow that to dry, and then I will eventually come back and I will take that a little bit further. We can see how that comes about anyway. There we go. So this is, it's almost dry, it's not completely dry, but I'm going to be putting another layer in here now. That again is coming in front of the layer that I've just put on. And I've mixed up what's close to a hooker's green, which I've done through sort of a dark blue and this sap green. You can of course buy it ready mixed, which it is also really rather nice. So sap green and dark blue, or an intense hooker's green that's ready mixed. So it's quite it's not a weak version of it, but it's also not intensely concentrated either. So I'm just putting almost like a layer of bushes or trees here that are in front of this sort of bluff that we've got at the background here. And I am going pretty much off-piste from what I remember from the picture I was shown now, because actually I'm just having a bit of fun. I'm putting a little bit of detail of bushes in the sort of middle distance there. I'm going to bring them across here, almost in front of what we've got already on the page. There we go. A little bit of detail in front of what we put there before. Just dragging it down. I want to break it up a little bit. I don't want it to be a solid colour. Just a suggestion that there's a little bit more going on in the layers moving back away from what will ultimately be our foreground here. Okay, a little bit more going across here as well, to this point here. Right. Now I want this to be the sort of the bank of a river here, so we've got the suggestion of it there, but I want to just maybe point it out a little bit more. I'm using the tip of my brush with a stronger amount of that burnt umber just along there where the bank is possibly hitting the water and bleed up into the green there. So there's definitely something going on there. Not a huge amount, but a suggestion. Just to give the eye a little bit of something interesting to look at. And we'll carry on across here. Maybe there's another little bit there. Just lets us think that there's layers of land moving away into the distance there. Need there to be things going on. Okay, I'm quite pleased with that at the moment. I'm going to give that a few minutes to settle potentially and dry a little bit more, and then I shall come back and we're going to put a little bit more detail in the sort of foreground, which ends up giving you the extra balance. Okay, so in order to balance the picture, we need something to be coming in a little bit more detail in this section here that kind of balances out the detail that we've got on the horizon then. So I'm going to put a couple of boats in because that's what was in the picture that I'm copying. And so I'm going to be using a clean brush, and I want to be able to put the sail in, probably one or two boats possibly. So I'm just going to use a lifting method. We're going in with a little bit of a wet brush and just lifting a little bit of the paint. Now you can, if you wanted to put a white sail in, obviously use white acrylic or possibly a very, very intense white watercolour. I'm not really sure. If this doesn't come out the right colour, then I shall do that. What I want is this long, thin suggestion of the sail, or certainly the mast, and a couple of sails. But again, I won't be really putting too much detail in. It's again a suggestion that the eye can put the rest in. So I'm just using water to lift the paint, and then I'm blotting with a piece of thick kitchen towel just to get the rough outline of the sail that I want to be putting in. There we go. Obviously, if there's any sailors watching, they might be a little critical about the height of the mast and the shape of the sail, but there we go. That's the first one. I might put a smaller one in as well, I think. Maybe a little bit further away. Just there. It's quite nice. A little bit of detail there. A smaller and thinner one coming over there. It is quite effective lifting paint off the canvas. In fact, actually, I'm going to go for threes because it's always a good idea to have things in threes. They look a little bit more balanced, so we'll perhaps do a tiny little one over here. I'm going to have these sails swinging the same way because they're obviously all using the wind from the same direction. A little bit vaguer, that one in the distance there. Right, okay, so I've lifted the paint off. Now I'm actually going to be adding the paint of the sail and the sailboat. Now I need to find a sort of ready brown, because I'd like to go with a sort of traditional turn of the century type wooden boat. So that is, what's that? Is that oh, that's an Indian red. That might be a little bit too red. What about this one? That's a burnt sienna. I quite like burnt sienna. Let's have a little look at that once I've woken it up. Oh yes, that's a nice colour. I like that. So that is going to be my sail colour. I'm going to make it quite an intense, concentrated colour for the main boat. There we go. Okay. Sail coming down there. Possibly a little jib as well there. A little bit of detail on that. Coming down. And I'm going to be putting the shape of the boat, not a lot of it, just a suggestion of it, in the water there, with the sails above. Okay, again, I haven't gone into a tremendous amount of detail there. I'm going to let that dry, that's quite wet. I'm going to put the one in the distance in as well, but again, perhaps a less intense version of the colour. Again, a little suggestion of the boat itself. Oops, gone a little bit out of shape there, but I'll pull that back in. There we go. And again, it's much further in the distance, that one, so it's a lot more vague. And can blend in a little bit and pick up a little bit of extra colour. And I'm just going to put a suggestion of this little one here in as well. Perhaps a little bit more colour than that. A little bit too vague going on there. There we go. And again, the boat itself underneath. Okay, actually that's not too bad at all. Make this one slightly bigger, bring it further down, because it's obviously closer to us. Although we still haven't got proper shape of the hull there. But again, the eye will put that in. Okay, so I'm now going to turn to detail along this section here. because actually this is our foreground. The painting I'm going to crop off at about there, but I'd still like a suggestion of maybe grasses and other bits and pieces going on, particularly on these sections here in the foreground. Maybe I'll put some bushes, more of an intense green. These bushes here. This is pure sap green I'm putting in here. A little suggestion of them there. Not an awful lot actually, to be honest with you, but just some little stubby sort of bushes. Okay, I'm going to come across here, put a few more in here. Now this is quite concentrated green because obviously we're very much in the foreground now, so we can actually have quite a lot of detail. Bushes again here, a suggestion, sort of ties this whole four section of the painting together. And you can be a little bit cavalier with it, really. Some of it I'm actually dry dragging across, you can see that there. So it's a strong amount of paint dragged over dry paint underneath, and you get quite an interesting response if you drag it across. Okay, so that's a very vague suggestion of what's there, and now I'm going to use quite concentrated paint. Just use the tip and maybe just put some grasses or suggestions of stuff growing in the foreground. So this will bring the eye very much forward at this point. Don't have to be anything specific. Maybe they're not grasses, maybe they're clumps of grasses. There we go. I'm doing this in a little bit too much of a rush here, but never mind. Again, it's a suggestion of a lot more busy stuff happening really, really close to us. So you've got your various layers there. You've obviously got the foreground, various stages of the middle ground, and then various layers of the background going back into the painting. And I'm actually quite pleased with that. It will be interesting when I go to class this Friday and have a word with the lady who showed me the painting last week, and we'll have a little look and see if this looks anything like the one that she showed me.